says in writing, we'll respond to you accordingly. So I'm not going to say that. I'll do it.
Thanks, everyone. Councillors and visitors, please remember to switch your electronic devices to silence. And welcome, everybody, and welcome inside. I'm glad we could accommodate you inside. I would also like to welcome our viewers at home who are watching the meeting via the live stream. Before we get started this evening, in line with state government restrictions, it remains mandatory for everyone to have signed in using the safer WA QR code or hard copy register, and of course wear your mask this evening so the meeting can proceed with proper conduct. You may, however, remove your mask when you are speaking this evening. We'll now move on with the meeting. If I could ask you all please to be upstanding, and Deputy Mayor Bianca Sandri, could you read out the opening prayer?
Almighty God, we ask you to guide us in all our discussions to show goodness, honesty, understanding and wisdom in all that we undertake to do. May we respect each other's views at all times, and we ask all of this in your name.
Amen. And Councillor Spagnola, if I could ask you to do the Acknowledgement of Country, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On behalf of councillors, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, on which this meeting is taking place, and show our respect for elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you, Councillor. And if I could ask you to remain standing tonight, and Councillor Migdale rightly so has indicated that with the passing of Prince Philip, it would be appropriate for us to conduct a minute's silence. Thank you, everyone. You can take your seats. Now brings us to the official opening of the meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, I declare the council meeting the 27th of April 2021 open at 7:02 p.m. Item 2 is apologies. I have nil. 3, approved leave of absence. I have Councillor Karen Caddy, who has been granted a leave of absence for the period 26th of April 2021 to the 10th of May 2021 inclusive. Item 4, disclosure of interest, and from the Planning and Development Committee of 20th of April, Councillor Bianca Sandri disclosed an impartial interest in item 12.1 DS2 as she is a former patient of the owner and attended university with a planning consultant. Item 5, petitions. I have nil. Councillors, do you have any unverified petitionings you would like to present this evening? No indication. Item 6, responses to previous questions from members of the public taken on notice, and all questions from the previous council meeting were published in the minutes of that meeting. That now brings us to item 7, which is public question time. In keeping with the latest COVID-19 restrictions, I'll be reading out questions submitted online prior to the meeting. Some questions were quite lengthy and included substantial preamble, so these have been slightly summarised, but the full versions will appear in the minutes of this meeting. An officer will also provide responses to the questions this evening, and I acknowledge there are some members from the Churchlands area who are with us this evening to watch the proceedings, but I'll be reading out the questions. The first question I have is from Sven Loos in Dianella. Question 1. City of Stirling verge trees roots has caused visible structural damage to my perimeter wall. Will the City of Stirling compensate me for the damage to be rectified? Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Loos, for your question. If you'd like to send in your concerns in writing, the City will consider these and respond accordingly.
Question 2. Under what premise and or bylaw can the City of Stirling employee enter a private residence and carry out an inspection of the structure within? Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks, Mr Loos, for the question. I understand that a building surveyor has inspected your property. The relevant legislation is the Building Act 2011, and under Section 100 and Section 101, the powers of entry and powers after entry for compliance purposes are provided for in that legislation. Under this legislation and delegation from the City, authorised officers are able to carry out site inspections and carry out the required compliance functions as stipulated under the Building Act.
Question 3, will the City of Stirling provide me with any records relating to contracts, historic information about a current verge tree that has been noted by the City of Stirling to have caused damage to my property? Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Yes, City officers will be in contact, Mr Lose, with you shortly in regards to your queries. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Julie Hollier from Churchlands. Question 1. The report response suggests that to provide a safe means of crossing at the roundabout, the City consider to provide local footpath connectivity with crossing ramps at that roundabout to the public access way. 1,250 students per week walk between Churchlands High School and Pearson Street. Please could you explain how the local footpath suggestion could possibly provide a safe means of crossing in these circumstances? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. It is not possible to design for all outcomes involving poor or illegal driver behaviour. However, the provision of a safe path with pram ramps would provide pedestrians with a dedicated and safe route to navigate through the roundabout.
Question 2. Stirling City Council has been aware of and has recognised the dangerous driving conditions in the area since 6 August 2013. With potentially 600 inexperienced P-plate drives at Churchlands High School, what preemptive action regarding the safety of children and other pedestrians crossing Churchlands Avenue will the City take, knowing that parking is causing the dangerous situation? Mr Littleton.
The issue of pedestrians crossing Churchlands Ave primarily occurs at the roundabout, and the provision of a safe path to navigate the roundabout would address that issue. The City is also proposing an alternative solution that would remove the significant majority of parking activity from these roads and would also encourage the school to better manage the parking spaces available on site.
And question 3, we're not asking the City to restrict types of vehicles or drivers. Can the Council apply signs to limit the traffic that is causing a danger and has become the safety issue to students and other pedestrians in this area? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Whilst the City can and does apply parking controls, it does not have the power to limit the use of public streets. The request to restrict parking activities on Churchland Avenue without providing a suitable alternative location would simply displace these vehicles to other roads that are already experiencing similar parking issues. This is the reason that the City is seeking a more holistic solution by seeking to have parking spaces made available on Memory Place.
Thank you. Now from Anthony Slee in Churchlands. Question 1. The police were called to assist in dealing with a student from Churchlands after an elderly resident was obscenely abused by him when she asked him if he could move his car to allow her elderly visiting friend to park in front of her house. The student was grossly aggressive and has frightened the elderly female who lives on her own and is a widow. This is not the first instance of elder abuse by students in this neighbourhood. The City has no authority over the behaviour of the students. However, does the Council accept it has authority over the parking signs that would limit student parking and therefore the opportunity for such confrontations? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, the City acknowledges that it has the power to regulate parking through parking controls. However, any limitations to parking along this road would apply equally to residents and visitors, and would also no longer be able to park for the prescribed period.
We have questions from Bruce Quayle in Churchlands. Question 1. Whilst we acknowledge the response to our points raised in the petition, we do not necessarily agree with all of them. However, we do support the City's alternative recommendation that they take action to provide students access to parking in Memory Place. Can you please provide an expected time frame for the alternate recommendation to be implemented? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Subject to the timing of discussions with the School and Education Department, the implementation of the parking controls could occur within a 4 to 6 week period.
Thank you. Question 2. With other schools, colleges and universities who have had similar issues, it appears commonplace for them to advise their students that limited local parking is available and therefore they are encouraged to make use of public transport. Will the City's communications with the Department of Education request that Churchlands High School adopt a similar policy? Mr Littleton.
Yes.
Question 3. The City's alternative recommendation may reduce but certainly would not eliminate nor deter students from parking within the Churchlands estate. The original reason for not extending the parking restrictions to all of the estate would no longer apply once a Memory Place student parking is available. So can our request for the extension of parking restrictions still be implemented? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. The implementation of parking controls on Churchlands Avenue can still be considered as a future option, subject to the success or otherwise of the proposed alternative recommendation in the agenda item tonight.
Thank you. Sue Roberts-Smith from Churchlands. Question 1. With regard to the petition lodged by residents of Churchlands regarding expansion of Churchlands estate parking restrictions. When a child is killed in Churchlands Avenue, will the city and every councillor be prepared to explain at the inquest or even a royal commission why they did not do more to prevent it? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, I appreciate the emotion of the question. However, the city is unable to respond to a hypothetical question when there are so many variables that contribute to motor vehicle accidents. However, the issue here is that any displacement of vehicles from Churchland Avenue without a suitable alternative arrangement would increase the risk to children in other areas that are already experiencing similar parking issues.
Thank you. Simon Rear in Churchlands. Question 1. At the City Council ordinary meeting in July 2013, Mr Tranter questioned the council about the dangerous and hazardous nature of the extra Churchlands High School traffic regarding the safety and parking in this area and asked, what action has been taken to alleviate their concerns over 8 years? Mr Tranter has since died, waiting for measures to be put in place. Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. The city has sought to consider and respond to all queries regarding parking and traffic issues raised by local residents. The city has not agreed in this instance to blanket parking restrictions on roads within this subdivision due to the potential displacement of parking to other roads that are already experiencing similar issues. The city considers that the alternative recommendation provides a solution to the issue that would remove the significant majority of parking activity from these roads and would also encourage the school to better manage the parking spaces available on site, which is the intent of the item that was presented to council.
Thank you. How many meetings has the council had internally and externally, including the school and other agencies, regarding the parking and safety issues in Churchlands, and what recommendation and actions have been taken during the past 8 years? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, there have been numerous meetings to deal with parking issues around Churchlands over the years. The city has responded. The development of the Memory Place car park was certainly a resolution to address car parking in the local precinct. Obviously, the school continues to grow, so the issue is something that we're continuing to monitor and manage.
And the last one is, how many complaints does the City of Stirling Council need to receive before preemptive action is taken to prevent serious injury or death to pedestrians or drivers? And I can probably just respond by saying that item, there is an item on the agenda that's been brought by a councillor that will be addressed by council this evening. Alison Rear from Churchlands. Question 1. Your response shifting the lack of actions by the council and placing the problem squarely on the shoulders of the state government is unacceptable. How many meetings have you had with the Education Department and other agencies over 8 years? And were any of those meetings productive? And that obviously is very similar to the previous question. We'll make sure that is responded to in writing. Question 2. Given there are 600 potential P-plate drivers and parents from Churchlands High School causing safety and parking issues on these roads, what has the council done to impress upon those state government agencies to which council refers? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Unlike privately owned businesses where the city can impose parking requirements and conditions of development, the redevelopment of schools is approved by the state government independently of the city. The city acknowledges and agrees that businesses should generally cater for their parking requirements on site, but it is not uncommon for businesses to also take into consideration parking provided in surrounding streets.
Thank you. Andy Basson from Churchlands. Question 1. In early 2016, the beginning of the school extensions, my wife and I wrote to our local MP and to the Director General of Education expressing our concerns about future traffic problems attributable to students and parents using our subdivision for parking and drop-offs and pickups. Has the council communicated with the Education Department over the past 5 years on these two specific matters, particularly given that, according to your report, many of the 207 on-site parking bays are not being utilised? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. The city has had numerous meetings with the school over the past 5 years to discuss traffic and parking issues, and at one of those meetings, the school advised that it was instructing students to not park within Memory Place, which means students were being actively displaced onto local streets by the school. The alternative recommendation in the report to be considered by council tonight seeks to give some priority to P-plate drivers to park in Memory Place. which we believe will go some way to addressing the issue.
And question 2, what power has a council to compel the school to open on-site car parking to students and parents, given that with any normal commercial industrial development, it is a condition that the mandatory on-site car parking facility will be available to all staff and visitors? Mr Littleton.
The City does not have powers to compel the school to take specific actions regarding on-site parking spaces. The City does, however, have full control over the parking spaces in Memory Place. Again, that will be further considered in the council agenda item tonight.
Thank you. And Mary Basson from Churchlands. The question refers to the council response to item number 12 of the petition, which is in the report on page 357. Council has consistently based its responses to residents largely on reference to livable neighbourhoods, but in fact our streets do not conform to livable neighbourhood principles and guidelines. Can the council please identify specifically where the livable neighbourhoods policy document shows how our streets comply with, in regards to student street parking, often of approximately 18 cars parked curbside, end-to-end, corner-to-corner, all day, and where those students have no relationship to residents or any work in this subdivision? And for 2, parents end-to-end parking corner-to-corner in the adjoining section of the avenue at pick-up and drop-off times? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Regardless of whether a subdivision was designed in accordance with livable neighbourhoods, the principles of these guidelines can still be applied to local roads. Churchlands Avenue and adjoining roads have been assessed as meeting the form and function of a low-volume access or yield street, and the width of the street is capable of accommodating on-street parking. Furthermore, as the school has frontage onto Churchlands Avenue, it is considered an integral part of the community, and the City does not have the powers to limit the use of public streets to certain parts of the community.
Thank you. Danny Lowe from Churchlands. Question 1, is it the responsibility of the council to place road signs around the school to assist in traffic management for the ratepayers, or do state government agencies outside the city have the authority to place road signs for the residents to stop the school traffic from blocking us from entering and exiting our driveway at peak times? Mr Littleton.
The Road Traffic Code prohibits drivers from blocking access to and from properties, and through its local laws, the City can infringe drivers who obstruct crossovers.
Question 2, do other state government agencies outside the city have authority to place no parking signs for the ratepayers, or does some other agency have authority to place the parking signs within the City of Stirling Council?
Thank you, Your Worship. The responsibility for parking controls on local roads is delegated to local governments. In this instance, these roads are within the City of Stirling, so it's our responsibility.
Thank you. And question 3 will be in the minutes and is along the same lines and will be answered in writing. Mary Acacio from Churchlands. Question 1. When were the observations by the council made to indicate that the worst driving behaviour appears to be by the parents, not the relatively small number of student drivers? And are you aware that residents observe bad driving by P-plate drivers every single day? Mr Littleton.
Observations have been undertaken by City officers on numerous occasions during both morning and afternoon school peak periods.
Question 2. When did the council observe the student drivers parking in the area and compare them to the number of parents delivering and collecting their children? Were the observations made by the council officers when the students were attending school during the day and the cars parked on the side of the road? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, observations were undertaken during normal school days.
Question 3. Does the council have any statistics regarding the number of student drivers versus the number of parents who use our streets for parking or for dropping and collecting students? What day and time did they make their observations? Mr Littleton.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, Mr Guillemot has provided a response, but we might just provide it in writing. We don't have the specific detail, obviously, but we have made some broad assessment of the parking mix.
Thank you. And Sue Tully from Churchlands. The council have letters and emails on file regarding speeding drivers in Churchlands. Does the council accept there are dangers on Churchlands Avenue and it's only a matter of time before there is a fatality? Does the council accept the information of residents who live in the estate? And look, that item is on the agenda this evening, and the council will make determination on that, and they'll obviously take on board the petition and the comments received from members of the public, especially from the Churchlands Avenue area. Question 2. Subdivisions such as ours, with only one entry point, which is also the exit point for all traffic, are no longer permitted by planning authorities, as in the event of obstruction at that one entry exit point, such as a subdivision layout, could prevent or critically delay access by emergency vehicles. This situation does not occur in neighbouring areas. How many streets in Churchlands have only one entry and exit, and do they cater for school traffic and parking? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Look, there are numerous instances where precincts have a single entry exit onto an arterial road, Regardless, this should not influence whether a road abutting a school is suitable for on-street parking.
Thank you. And question 3, approximately 250 Churchlands High School students are disgorged every school morning at the Pearson Street bus stop and return to catch their bus home in the afternoon. They go through our laneway across the Churchlands Avenue roundabout and directly up Churchlands Avenue to Churchlands High School. They return on the same route in the afternoon. It is potentially dangerous to simultaneously have the added parental drop-offs, pickups, routed throughout the subdivision, as well as the all-day student parkers entering or leaving the subdivision. Is there any busy street in Churchlands where 250 students cross each day? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. Ideally, students would be able to board and alight from public transport on roads surrounding the school to minimise the number of crossing movements. However, the City does not have control over the provision of public transport services, and we must work with the existing services provided by the PTA.
Thank you. And Christopher Hollier from Churchlands. Question 1. This is in regards to response 7. The inability of tradespeople to gain access to our homes to carry out their work. No sender at various times of the day. Tradespeople need to park their cars on the lawns of the home they are attending because there is no available parking on the roads. With all-day student parking in place, it is obvious that tradespeople will not be able to access homes either in school peak time or during the day. When did the officers of council make their observations regarding the inability of workmen to access homes in this area? Was it over a period of days and months at different times of the day? If so, can these be provided, the days and times? And we can certainly respond to you in writing with the details. Question 2. When council officers made their observations and did not see tradesmen parked on our lawns, did they see the rubbish that students leave on our streets? Did they see empty pizza boxes, empty packets, plastic coffee cups, and did they spot the cigarette butts and bongs? Mr Littleton. What sort of school are they running there?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, the City's observations were confined to parking and traffic issues on local roads. Probably didn't pay a lot of attention to the cigarette butts and bongs.
Question 3. A resident has observed students who had parked opposite his home were removing the silver tags that council had placed on trees that required lopping. They were moving the silver tags to other trees. Did the council officers take note during the year that silver tags placed on the specified large trees near the waterway for attention by council had all been moved to different trees, and did the council waste taxpayer money attending to the trees that did not need attention?
Thank you, Worship. Look, we'll refer that to our guys for review. I can't provide a response tonight.
And all I can add to that, Mr Hollier, if you are watching on the live stream and you see this sort of behaviour, notify us immediately, please. Mr Hadley from Woodlands. Question 1. On the 10th of May 2019, on behalf of the Ewan Street Community Group, the question was asked why the annual budget for vehicle panel beating was exceeded by a staggering average of $241,000 over the previous 5 years. Can the council provide expenditure figures for the previous financial year and the figures for this current year? Ms Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Hadley's question looks to be related to information provided on the 14th of May 2019, which indicated an average spend of $236,000 from 14-15 to 18-19 against a budget of $185,000, so $51,000 per annum. With regards to Mr Hadley's request for the detailed information from 1920 and 2021 to date, we'll provide that in the meeting minutes.
Thank you. And if the expenditure exceeds budget costs, would this imply that vehicles with only very minor damage are being directed to the contractor SA Smash Repairs? Ms Hawkins.
It's probably me, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Hadley. No, this does not imply the City are sending only minor damaged vehicles to SA Smash Repairs. If expenditure exceeds budget, it would imply that the City's vehicles have been involved in more incidents requiring repair than that which were budgeted for.
And question 3, is the City's Transport Manager site photograph, I assume that means citing the photograph, aware of the extent of damage done to each vehicle? Mr Littleton.
Thank you, Worship. The City's Coordinator Fleet Services reviews and assesses all damaged vehicles that occurred to the City's fleet prior to forwarding those vehicles through for repair.
Thank you. And the last one, we go on to Mr Simon Wheeler of Scarborough. Question 1. It is unclear to me, that's to Mr Wheeler, from the report, which, if any, relevant sections of the Act will be included in the policy document. This is a special concern in regard to Part 5 public participation, specifically Provision 5.1, where the policy wording does not note that meetings are required under the Act to be open to the public, unless of a type noted in Section 5.23, brackets 2 of the Local Government Act 1995. Without the enabling text, it would appear to the casual reader that whether a meeting is open to the public or not is at the sole discretion of the CEO, which is not the case. Can the City please confirm if the text of the Act is to be included in this section, and if not, will the City include the specific circumstances of when a meeting might be closed to the public in the local law, and also reflect the general requirement that council meetings are to be open to the public? Mr Blanchard.
Thank you for the question, Mr Wheeler. The draft meeting procedures local law proposes no changes to the business of the City that will be done in front of the public. The vast majority of committee and council business is dealt with in public, and this will continue under the draft new local law. The circumstances in which a meeting can be closed to the public are set out in the Local Government Act and regulations, and the City cannot change them.
Thank you. And question 2, it is suggested in Section 4.5, bracket 6 of the draft that a member must not submit a notice of motion at a meeting dealing with a matter that is wholly or substantially outside of the member's ward unless prior written agreement has been obtained from A, one ward member from the ward in which the matter relates, and B, the remaining ward member or the presiding member. A similar provision is added in 5.5, brackets 4 in regard to petitions. This change is noted in the explanatory memorandum. Through the proposed change to 4.5, bracket 6 is not. The intent of the provision is contrary to the intent of the Local Government Act, which makes clear the role and responsibility of councillors, S 2.10, and this unnecessary restriction on the ability of councillors to bring important matters to council is of particular concern. What jurisdiction can the City provide, what justification can the City provide in attempting to override the intent of the Local Government Act, and in what fashion does it think that this provision is enforceable? Mr Blanchard.
Thank you for the question, Mr Wheeler. The proposed changes to clause 4.5 are outlined on page 254 of the agenda, which is the last page of the explanatory memorandum. So those changes are detailed in that document. The Act provides for a system of representation by ward onto a council that governs for the whole district. The proposed provisions recognise that ward councillors develop a deep relationship with their community that results in detailed knowledge of the issues within their ward. They are a reasonable step to dealing with the issues raised by an elected member that are wholly or substantially in a different ward. The provision would not apply to issues that relate to the whole of the district of the City of Stirling. Whether the provisions are enforceable is determined by the Joint Standing Committee on Delegated Legislation of the West Australian Parliament, which reviews local laws after they are adopted.
Thank you, Mr Blanchard. And that brings us to the end of question time. I'll now move on to item 8. I will just add, obviously, all of those will still appear in the minutes, so the questions and the answers to all those. I'd also like to particularly thank many of the residents of Churchlands who chose not to come tonight to assist us with running the meeting in an orderly fashion under the COVID restrictions. So we thank them for their understanding. Item 8, applications for leave of absence. Councillors, I have a leave request for the 25th of May. Oh, that's me. Councillors, I have a leave request for the 25th of May 2021. Are there any other leave requests? No, can I have a mover and a seconder to accept that? Move Councillor Migdale, seconded Councillor Perkoff. If you can just go to the vote, please, councillors. How many have we got? We've got Councillor Proud and Sargent. Do you want to grab the one, maybe try the one next door? Can we get Councillor Sargent's voting? What? Yeah. All right, so that's unanimous. Thanks. We'll move on. Item 9, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder to accept the council minutes of the 30th of March 2021? Move Councillor Hatton, seconded Councillor Spagnolo. And just a show of hands while we wait for that to be fixed. Thank you. And against? All right, so we have Councillor Farrelly against and the rest for. That is carried. Item 10, announcements by the presiding member. I have nil. Item 11, unresolved business from previous meetings. I have nil. Item 12, reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors, with your indulgence, before we go to that, given the COVID restrictions, and we do have some members from Churchlands who've made the effort to attend tonight, If you're okay, I'll bring forward the item relating to that, which is item 14.1. It's the notice of motion from Councillor Elizabeth Ree, and we'll bring that to the front of the meeting. That way you don't have to stay all night if you don't want. So I have item 14.1, notice of motion, Councillor Elizabeth Ree, expansion of Churchlands Estate, parking restrictions. Councillor Ree, your motion. And just your mask, you're welcome to take off while you speak so we can hear you clearly if you'd like.
Yep. Page 345. I'd like to also move an additional one, additional recommendation 3, please, based on the, where are we?
That's all right, if you want to just read those.
Page 352, the alternative recommendation.
Yep.
That the city installs no parking signs to the 52 bays along the southern side of Memory Place applicable from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. with the exception provided to P-plated vehicles. That the city writes to the Department of Education and Churchlands Senior High School to discuss the implementation of the proposed solution, including an effective communication strategy by the school to all affected parties. And the third one, that a report be presented to the Community and Resource Development Committee meeting to be held on the 9th of November 2021 to summarise the parking activities and issues that have occurred and the implementation of the strategy as outlined in recommendation 1 above. And that is to allow, if you like, a trial so that if it doesn't work and it's not addressing the issue with the students, then we go to the next step.
Great.
And the reasons for the decision, if you want to raise up a bit so people can see, I can read more of that.
I don't think, you can if you'd like to, but I think they're in the report.
Oh, it's in the, it's in the report.
The intent's clear and it makes sense to bring it back.
Yeah, so that way, if it's, we're making sure that if the officers believe that the way around
Councillor, I just need a seconder, so let's not debate it. But it's clear why you're bringing it back.
Oh.
Seconded, Councillor Proud. Is there anyone opposed? A question? In that case, I will go to the mover if you'd... Councillor Ree, if you'd like to speak.
The issue regarding the parking has been there since I've been on council for many years. It has actually got a lot worse since the state government changed the cohort from January to July and increased the age. That has caused even more problems. It also has been increased because the area in which the children come from, as far away as Mount Hawthorn to Churchlands High School, has increased the amount of students in the school. It is nearly 3,000 students at the school with 42 transportables and down to half a footy oval. There's a lot of children there, and as actually said today, when you've got 600 potential P-platers, that are people that are just getting their licence, it is a recipe for disaster, not only for the existing residents, mature residents, but also young children that are running, which are not seen by an inexperienced driver. This is not the first time this has been raised by council, by myself and others. It actually escalated a couple of years ago in Outram Street when the Transperth buses said they actually couldn't even get through Outram Street because the cars parked on the side of the road. We've had issues with our security officers where students have parked either side of the road on verges and then actually parking in people's driveways. And when questioned by the owners, they were told, with a few adjectives, to go away as they would be late for school and they had an exam and they'd pick up the car at 2 o'clock, which would effectively block in the person, which that meant that they had to ring the police, which that took a while, and then they had to get tow trucks and everything else to get a car that didn't belong to them out of their driveway. Now, this has just become unrealistic. It's been raised many times with the then principal. They have a new principal now, so it could be different. And we also have a new member of parliament, which also could be different. So to address these concerns. But what has been a constant is that the increase in students and maybe parents behaving badly as far as the traffic is associated with the neighbourhood and what should be a nice calm estate, both Churchlands Estate and on the other side of Churchlands High School, has not diminished. It has actually increased. The people are frustrated. It's becoming a major issue of safety, which really needs to be addressed. I hope that the suggestion by the officers in which to use Memory Place, because that's the only close proximity the City of Stirling has the rights with car parking in which to change with the rules of who can and can't park there at this interim period. If it doesn't work come November, I think, and in that time, hopefully we'll be able to monitor it more by rangers and also by the public, that if they see anything or hear anything or believe it's not working, that they actually make their comments too. I look forward to it coming back to Council on the 4th of November, and that will then advise both the public and also the Council and staff whether or not this interim measure is working or not, so that we can start the year 2022 with another suggestion if it doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ree. Councillor Proud, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Owen. Look, firstly, I would like to say I understand the residents' total frustration and angst with this problem, and it's been ongoing for quite some time. It actually kicked in full gear in 2013 with Churchlands Senior High School adding 16 classrooms for their computer laboratory, and there's been any amount of building since and development there, as well as they've got parking on site. And I think all of us around here, we would be hearing from people who live in residential areas surrounding schools, would be hearing about exactly the same problems, and they're WA-wide in the metro area. To restrict parking in Churchlands Avenue, which was touted at the beginning, that may well sort the problem, albeit at some inconvenience to the residents. What it would simply do is disperse and displace those students to other areas in Woodlands and further west along Hale Road on Churchland side that are already experiencing similar or, and in some cases, far worse issues. So the restriction of 52 bays in Memory Place on the south side for P-platers, there's ample room to do that. You can take away the teacher-only parking, open it up to P-platers. There's also available parking, as is in the report and as we've had residents make the point today and in the petition, there's ample areas that are available during the day. Now, this will enable the city, it's a Memory Place is a public road. We get to implement and enforce parking restrictions, and it places the onus back on the senior high school management and also the Department of Education. So this is one way I think it will work, but we'll wait and see in November when a report comes back to us, but I'm really hopeful and optimistic that this will work and it won't displace, make it too inconvenient for the members of Churchlands Avenue with their own street. Thank you. I hope you will support the motion.
Councillor Ferranti.
Mr Mayor, mine was only going to be a fairly quick question, but anyway, I'll go through the preamble, and I appreciate the time into that. My question was around for the officers, when they consider this escalation, if it does become an escalation and they start to bring in further restrictions in the area, that they consider anyone for parking permit issue or don't have a parking permit, because I had examples in Mount Lawley when we implemented some parking that they didn't have a driveway and therefore parked on the street and received a fine even though they were residents of the area. So just something to consider further down the track because I haven't seen it anywhere in the report. That's all it was. Thanks.
Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you. Mine's really a question as well. Have we made any sort of comment to the Education Department about this? They are the owners of the land on which the school rests. They've got 3,000 plus students there. It's one of the biggest schools in the metro area. They were going to open up another school. I think it's about time they looked at that. this is not a school that's been built to take more than, my understanding was 2,000 at the most, and it's gone way beyond that. The Education Department needs to really address the problem, and I'd like to see a point 4 on that we write to the Education Department and indicate our concern.
It's point 2, councillor. It is in the motion already.
Was it? Thank you. My glasses, but yes, I think it should be done straight away. I shouldn't, excuse me, I will sit down.
And in fairness to Councillor Farrelly, she did mention she had the wrong glasses before the meeting. Councillors, I'm not inclined to open debate any further on this. There's no one actually opposed to this. So it was only for the sake of a question that I allowed Councillor to open it, because I know there's a fair bit of public interest, but I don't think we need to debate an item where there's no one actually opposed to it. So, Councillor Reid, do you need to close, or are you happy to support the motion?
No, I think it's just self-explanatory, especially in the report, where the officers have gone through and said that from their observations, not all the car parking bays are used. Having worked at Churchlands High School as a teacher, I know sometimes it's very hard to find parking places as a teacher, but a lot of that was occupied by the students as well. So anything that can resolve the issue or as a variable can be approved or dismissed, I think is important. So I wish that everyone support it, and hopefully when it comes back in November we can have another strategy, because it could be coming to a high school near you.
Thanks, Councillor Ring. With that closed debate. So it's moved Councillor Ree, seconded Councillor Proud. I will now put that motion. Councillor Spagnolo. Yep, and that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Now we will move back to the reports and recommendations of committees. Councillors will go on to the Planning and Development Committee items. The confidential item 12.1 9.1 is required to be pulled out as it needs an absolute majority vote. Councillors, are there any other P&D items you wish to pull out this evening? Councillor Sandri.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to pull out item 12.1 CP2.
CP2. Councillor Reid, did you indicate?
Yes, please. 12.1 DS1, please.
DS1. Is there any other indication? If not, we'll go straight to that one. So we'll go item 12.1 DS1, lot 14691, house number 2, Plantation Street, Menora, local development plan. Councillor Boothman, as chair of the committee, your motion.
Yes, I'll move the recommendation on page 9 from the committee.
Seconded Councillor Migdale. Councillor Ree, you're opposed. Thank you. Councillor Boothman.
For this stage, thanks.
Councillor Migdale.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Oh, goodness, that's a relief. I would like to make one comment on this item, and that is, in the years that I've been on council, I probably would be hard-pressed to recall an example of where the applicant and residents have had such a great cohesive relationship to work towards achieving the absolute highest and best outcome all round. There is no doubt in my mind that this is a win-win scenario. Not everybody will be entirely happy all of the time, but I can very comfortably say that in this instance, I do believe that we have reached the absolute best outcome, and I hope that you all support this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ree.
Thank you. If I look at, I think that too, originally when you look at page 8, if you look at page 18, fixate myself, that 88% of people objected. Now, I think that there has to be a reward, not a reward, that's probably acknowledgement by staff to say that they worked with a lot of the community in which to address these things over a period of time. And whilst it's true, not all the community is happy, it's mainly only addressing one side. I don't think plantation side people aren't as happy. The other side are. But another part of it, this was initially a nursing home application, and now it's not, it's retirement home. Could I have a comment, please? Because when it went out for consultation, it was a nursing home, and then it got changed, and the conditions for a nursing home are different from a retirement home, please.
Mr Rodich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Councillor Reid, this is about a local development plan which sets out the site planning for this site, the development standards which apply. It doesn't talk about the land use of the development. That will be considered as part of the development application process. So when this local development plan was advertised, it was advertised to the public, detailing those provisions of the local development plan, not the land use.
Thank you for that comment, Mr Mayor, through you. The impression by the people when it went out for consultation was a nursing home versus the retirement village which has come. So I think that might be an issue as it is, especially when I look at the fact of things changing. When on page 18 as well, when we look at the recreation area, the greater clarity has been provided regarding access to Yukon Reserve. Additional information regarding tree planting on site and location of subject site in relation to mature trees edging Yukon Reserve. On page 19 it says there's no financial implications by the city. However, in order to allow a lot of this to go ahead through the landscaping, it's actually the city that's planting more trees on the reserve, not actually the proponents. And I know it's part of the scheme. However, one, it should actually be addressed that we shouldn't have to do that. Landscaping requirements should be more for them. And I know we do after looking at what happened in Dianella, where the public open space ended up being a monetary thing and no public open space. One is, why are we doing that? And if we're making it sure that they're mature trees, they are going to plant some. How do we know that they're not dead in 2 days because they're planted in front of somebody's window with a view? And secondly, why don't we have a financial implication number?
Mr Rodich.
Number.
Councillor Reid, that comment in regards to landscaping is included in the local development plan, and that's for, I guess, the applicant when an application is put forward that they must satisfy that requirement of the local development plan with tree planting. It's within the site, it's not within the Yukon Reserve, so there's no cost to the city.
Thank you. Councillor Reid, have you finished?
No, because it actually says it's greater access to the reserve, and the way they've changed it is to get greater access. And the way that I read it, regarding the landscaping, they have reduced percentage of landscaping because they're going to have access to the reserve. That's the way I read it, and that's the way a couple of other people read it. But happy to see the interpretation when the something else goes on it. On page 21, it actually states that with the alternative recommendation in here on page 21 and the original recommendation on page 9, could you tell me what the difference is, please?
Ms Shears.
Through you, Mr Mayor, on page 9, that was the recommendation that was put to the committee first up. So this item, if you may recall, was considered early in March. Then it was deferred by that committee to make some representations from the community. The alternate recommendation that you're talking about on page 21 is a recommendation before council tonight, which went through committee, in terms of addressing all the issues that were outstanding at the last committee meeting.
Councillor Reid.
Well, then it would have had another recommendation there, I'd imagine, looking at the...
Councillor, are you opposed to this item, or are you just going to...
I'm opposed, but I'm just saying our meeting procedure guidelines would say that would have been written in a different way. But anyway, I'm fine. On page 41, it states, the panel thanks the applicant for their time and presentation. The panel does not support the proposal and has identified several opportunities for further improvement. In particular, the panel strongly advises that a more detailed response to site and context underpins the development of the plan with a focus on the opportunities of landscape, the impacts to key vistas and views, and their capacity to contribute to the broader community, which I thought was an interesting comment from that panel. But I was just, one part of that I was going to say is, why wouldn't we, if they actually asked, this has gone backwards and forwards, why wouldn't the applicant address that and change it more? They have changed some of the things, but they didn't change all of them.
Mr Rodish?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Reid. This application was referred to the Design Review Panel in October last year. The applicant subsequently took on board those comments and delivered on all those points raised through the Design Review Panel, and we have commented in that on the report. In particular, view corridors were provided, additional landscaping was provided on the site, as you've just discussed previously, and context was also looked at, and in that regard we looked at the height of the development zones across the Yukon Reserve, but also at the interface on the west side and the east side of the property. So all those comments through the Design Review Panel were taken on board, and the LDP was modified accordingly. That relates back into October last year. It's been reviewed a number of times since.
Councillor Ree, and you have 30 seconds.
Well, quickly, on page 45, it actually states some of those design principles, and instead of addressing them, as was stated by the design panel, it actually says, the reply from staff is, this principle will be addressed at the detailed design stage. Well, that's after the horse has bolted. We should be doing these things now, and using the Yukon Reserve as a buffer to all their environmental and their vicarious living is not really good enough, I don't believe. I do believe that it should be changed in the sense that the people in Plantation Road should have actually more respect for what's going on and not just leave it straight back with, oh, well, you've got Yukon Reserve, city will look after it, don't worry. Well, if it's our part of our city, if it's our City of Stirling ratepayers are paying for that Yukon Reserve, well then they should be contributing to it, and the applicant should as well. So that concerns me, leaving everything up to the design phase, which I think could be addressed in this report.
Thanks, Councillor Ree. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this item? If not, I will go to Councillor Boothman. Do you wish to close debate? Sorry, Councillor Spagnola, you'd like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, look, just very quickly, look, I sense the ward councillors are very comfortable with the recommendations that are here. And I think we need to be very professional about this. This matter has been coming to and fro to this council for the last 7-8 months. Each time it comes to a committee or a council meeting, we say, look, come back, fix this, fix that. You know, we've dealt with bulk, we've dealt with height, we've dealt with density, we've dealt with all of the reports from consultants. One of the things that's still a little bit dodgy, if you like, is the traffic. But whatever you put there, there is going to be a problem, not a problem, but some difficulty with traffic. So I think that needs to be accepted. I think it's wrong for us to look to find something else that might be wrong with it. I mean, these guys have met several times. I'm actually very impressed with the way the planner and the developer has dealt with this. They have tried so hard to accede to just about every demand that this council has made. And for that reason, I'm supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Ferrante.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, this is what we call a win-win for most people. It's taken a long time to get to this point. Bethany have negotiated and worked to plan out with most of the residents around that area, and the residents, although you know, would never want height, but you know, it's just the way it's progressing. And as we require more and more residences for the elderly, and as people move into those lifestyle ages, these will become more and more prominent in the area. And look, there's an issue with traffic, and I agree with Councillor Spagnola that that will be need to be looked at, but that'll be in the next phase. We're aware of that, and to be honest, agree with the resident that has put in a number of discussions around that. So I think that's something we should seriously look at as we progress along. We don't even know if they'll ever build these, depending on the economic conditions. This has been kicked around. So I support it tonight. I've always been trying to proactively, as Councillor Mcdale has as well, to work with all parties and trying to get an end result, and that's what our job is. So I'll be supporting that, and hopefully the rest of the councillors will as well.
Thank you. Councillor Boothman, would you like to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. As identified by Councillor Spagnolo, The developer, in this instance, has bent over backwards to address all of the issues that have been raised, and following on from the meeting on the 16th of March, they submitted a revised ODP and worked with the local residents who had been objecting to address their issues, to the point that the meeting last week, we only had the one lady that came along and she just spoke about the parking has been identified, and that would no doubt be dealt with later on as this matter develops. So I urge all councillors to vote in favour of the item. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, a closed debate. So it's moved Councillor Boothman, seconded Councillor Migdale. If you can go to the vote, please, councillors. Thank you. And that motion is carried with Councillor Ree voting against and all other councillors voting for it. We'll now go to item 12.1, CP2, Local Planning Scheme number 3, Amendment number 118, modifications to deliver vehicle access ways requirements of the Walter Road West Neighbourhood Centre Local Development Plan, outcomes of advertising. It's been pulled out by Councillor Sandry. Councillor Boothman.
Yes, I think actually Councillor Sandry, it was just matters that she raised at the committee last week, and there's the alternate recommendation on the white pages.
Yep.
With just the slightly amended wording, and I'll move that way.
And seconded Councillor Sandry. Is there... Yep. Oh, sorry, yep. Yep. Is anyone opposed? If not, I will put that. And that is unanimous. Thank you, councillors.
If anyone wants to debate the next item, we'd have to go behind closed doors.
Thanks, councillors. Councillor Boothman, would you now like to move the balance of reports with the exception of 12 point... Sorry, Councillor Sandry.
Mr Mayor, is the property strategy coming out? Is that what you pulled out, 9.2 to start with?
No, it's not.
Are we able, am I still able to?
Yes, well...
Under confidential?
So let's just... Yep, so we'll leave that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So, Councillor Boothman, would you like to move the balance of reports with the exception of 12.1 9.1 and 12.1 9.2? They will both be heard behind closed doors later this evening.
So moved.
Seconded Councillor Proud. If we can go to the vote, please, councillors. That is unanimous. Thank you. Members of the gallery, please be advised that the remainder of the Planning and Development Committee recommendations have been adopted by exception resolution without 9.1 and 9.2. Councillors will now move on to the Director Council reports. And the first one of those is 13.1. We'll go to the Proposed Meeting Procedures Local Law 2021 on page 202. Is there a mover of a motion? Councillors, please. Councillor Ree, motion?
I'd like to move that it be held... Killing myself. I'd like to move that this be held over to the next council meeting, because I think that there's a lot of being only given to councillors over the weekend. I think there's a lot of issues in here that needs addressing, and I'll just give you one example, is the fact that while we've got on page 2,208, sorry, 2,000, 4.3, we've got Acknowledgement of Country, we don't actually have our prayer. So, why did the prayer get missed? So I think it would be...
So if I can just clarify something though, this is the motion tonight is to go out and advertise. So it has come to council. Councillors have been asked for feedback on numerous occasions on this. It didn't just come to us on Friday. This has been around for a little while now, and this is only to go out. So during that advertising period, there'd be plenty of opportunity to bring up as a councillor as well any other issues you want. So I don't think holding it over is going to achieve anything. That's all.
I have actually commented several times. It's just that if you look at the recommendations...
It's not open for debate. I'm just...
No, it doesn't actually say advertise on 2003, 203.
It goes out for consultation.
It doesn't actually say that. It says the city gives notice of the proposed meetings law. It says the minister will be provided with a copy. The public submit be presented to a future council. It doesn't actually say advertise there. That's why...
Let me get some clarification from Mr. Blanchard.
I'm happy to change it to edit.
Let me just check.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Act says that to initiate a local law, the council must give notice of the local law, and sets out the requirements for what that notice is. That includes advertising, publication on the city's website and promotion through other means. Through that, we will gain public submissions, which will be brought back to council at a future council meeting.
So it will come back to us. Item 3 makes that clear.
I actually do believe, to make it quite clear, because even though it says good notice, it doesn't actually state that. So maybe if we change that to the advertising, number 3, that after advertising, the public submissions will be presented at a future council meeting. So that makes it quite clear, and then I'm happy to support it.
Are you happy with that, Mr. Blanchard, that it says following advertising, public submissions?
We will be happy with that change, yes.
You happy with that if it says following advertising? Yep.
I'm happy with that. Thank
Great.
you.
Okay, so we've got a seconder for that motion then. Councillor Sargent, is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that motion. Thanks, councillors. That's unanimous. Item 13.2, the City of Stirling Integrity Strategy and Integrity and Misconduct Management Practice. Do I have a mover of a motion, councillors? Councillor Sandri.
Happy to move the officer's recommendation on 256.
Thank you. And is there a seconder for that? Councillor Proud. Is there anyone opposed? Councillor Ree, Councillor Sandri, your motion? Nothing. Councillor Proud? Happy. Councillor Ree?
Look, I have met with the staff regarding this a couple of times. I am concerned that, and whether or not, one, is there any hurry for us to approve it now that it can't be held over? That's my first question before I speak.
Mr. Blanchard?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I did meet with Councillor Ree, and I must say that she made a number of positive suggestions that have improved both the strategy and the misconduct management practice that is presented to council today. That was the reason that it was previously held over. This is driven by the audit committee, who has sent this up to council, and the only risk is that there are questions asked at the next audit committee meeting as to why this hasn't been adopted by council.
Is there a reason you'd like to hold it over, councillor?
Yeah, and then thank you. A lot of the comments I made are addressed. The definition of confidentiality and the penalty therein for non-compliance, did I miss it? Because I did ask for that and I can't find it still.
Mr. Blanchard?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mayor. The issue of confidentiality is dealt with in the Councillor Code of Conduct that was recently adopted by this council.
Councillor Reid?
I do believe that if we're going to have a documentation for anyone to pick up, we still need the definitions in these documents so that it's black and white and people know, along with the penalty therein should be there. I did make that comment. A lot of this misconduct and management and integrity, the submissions of forms for someone to complain about an issue, irrespective of what it may be, is supposed to be a confidential document. That confidentiality is actually compromised if the wrong person gets it or if that person gives it to someone they shouldn't give it to, even though the form clearly says, do not give it to someone. That's what it says on the form as far as confidentiality means. Now, the argument about what the definition of confidentiality is for that person to distribute it to the person that actually was complained about needs to be tidied up. And therefore, if the person who did move that form, forward that form to the person that was complained about, then breached the confidentiality, which is actually written on the form, therefore, where's the penalty? So, you know, I don't think this is actually addressed. And I did go through all this.
Mr. Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, it's not possible for this strategy to deal with every eventuality, but we did include a suggestion that Councillor Ree had made, which I agree with on page 277, where we included the words that the city's investigation process will, unless otherwise required by law, be conducted confidentially and protect the complainant from reprisal. And I think that was a positive addition by Councillor Ree.
Councillor Ree?
That's it, but we still don't have what the definition of confidentiality is. And if we're going to put in a code of conduct, I'd just like to put it in there. And I know you might sit there and say it'd be caught up in something else, but to make it quite clear, I do believe it still needs to be in here. We're
Mr.
talking
Blanchard,
about
can you respond to that? Is there a way to put some sort of reference?
the definitions at the beginning.
The definitions?
I just feel it needs to be here. So people don't fear. You know, you should be able to do things without fear or favour. You should be able to do things without being bullied or a toxic environment.
Yes.
And not fear that you're going to be done in or whatever.
Yep.
Done in.
Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We could cross-reference either the Act or the Code of Conduct in relation to confidentiality. If council were minded to add dot point 3, after dot point 1, the council adopts the amended City of Stirling Integrity Strategy with the inclusion of a definition of confidentiality as contained in the relevant legislation.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Ree? Yep. Good. Yep. That was the only item?
There was a couple other with regard to the penalty, because if you do, if you do breach the confidentiality and then you send it, then you actually, in my opinion, you have breached misconduct, because you were given a form which was supposed to be confidential.
I don't think the strategy needs to outline the breaches from the Act and the Local Government Act, though.
But it goes nowhere. If people breach it, there is no penalty. It goes nowhere. You breached it. Wow. It's like nepotism. In the Act, it says through nepotism not allowed in local government. But there is no penalty, there's no watchdog, and if you do, nothing happens. I thought the whole idea of this was to tidy all this stuff up. I mean, I could make a list just from my personal experiences.
Yeah.
But,
I don't have a problem with what you're saying, Councillor Ree. What my suggestion is, this is an integrity strategy, and I don't know if it then needs to include every other bit of legislation that relates to complaints procedures and disciplinary procedures.
When will this be back up? Are we actually saying that this policy is going to be reviewed annually or every 10 years, or where are we going with this?
Mr. Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the request of the Audit Committee, when the Integrity Strategy was adopted for the first time last year, the Audit Committee required it to be reviewed annually. This is the first annual review of the Integrity Strategy and will be reviewed every year following.
Councillor?
Okay, well, I don't personally want to put it to the test, but one never knows. I'm quite happy then that as long as we've got that addressed into it, and a lot of the other comments I've made, Mr. Blanchard has addressed in here, that if something issue does arise, we take it up with the Audit Committee and move it forward as far as the strategy goes to review.
Sure.
Bearing in mind that I know that there is a report coming from, I think it's LGMA or someone, LG Pro, someone is writing a report on the implementation, the difficulties of the implementation of this actual policy. So that'll be interesting. I'd like a copy of that when it's available. Thank you.
You may. Thank you for that, Councillor. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this? If not, I'll go to Councillor Sundry. If you'd like to close, she's happy to put the item. So we'll now put that move. Councillor Sundry, seconded Councillor Proud with the inclusion. Oh, sorry, did I have to? Yeah, I think I've just sort of, just casually just amended it myself. Councillor Sundry and Councillor Proud, are you happy with that amendment? Sorry, councillors. Yeah, I'm getting indication. So it does become part of the substantive. It's like I can read minds. All right, so we'll now put that motion. Move Councillor Sundry, seconded Councillor Proud. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. We now go to item 13.3, the emergency relief donation, Tropical Cyclone Saroja appeal in 2021. Councillor Ree.
I'm happy to support that the council approves of the donation of $5,000 towards the Lord Mayor's. Should we put the City of Perth Lord Mayor's?
No,
business
there's
for
only
it?
one.
There's only one?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I've been trying, but there's only one still. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Farrelly? Is there anyone? Sorry, Councillor Lagan, a question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. My question was, why do we not go for the maximum figure of 10,000?
I think normally the officers' reports always have a 5,000 amount, and it's up to councillors if they'd like to increase it. So normally the reports are.
Yeah, well, I'd like
It's at
to
the discretion.
increase that to 10,000.
Can I ask Councillor Ree, you happy with 10,000?
Yeah, I'm happy with 10,000.
Do I hear
$360 million
11,
budget,
11,
it's fine.
11, 12?
I'm not-
Councillor Farrelly, are you
I'm
happy with 10?
Yes.
Great. All right, is there anyone opposed?
Just before we do, Mr Mayor, just before we do,
Sure.
can we provide a clarification of council implications?
Sure. Councillor Sargent, you got a question?
It was my understanding that through our budgetary processes, we only put $15,000 aside for these types of things. Am I correct in that understanding?
Yeah. Mr Blanchard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Sargent is correct. So we have prepared an alternative recommendation, which you can see up on our screen here, which approves a $10,000 donation and then authorises the expenditure of an additional $5,000 of unbudgeted funds, if that is what council is minded to do.
You happy with that, Councillor Sargent? Yep. All right. So we have the mover, Councillor Ree, seconded Councillor Farrelly. They're both happy with the suggested increase from Councillor Lagan. So there's no one opposed, so we'll put that motion. Thank you, and that is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 13.4, superannuation for elected members. Councillor Lagan.
Yes, I'll move the officer's recommendation and thank them for the report.
Thank you. Councillor Ree has seconded that. Is there anyone opposed? I didn't think there would be. I'll put that motion. That is unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.5, the Australian Local Government Association National General Assembly, absolute majority vote is required on this one. So, Councillor Ree. Happy with the recommendation? The officer's recommendation?
Still staying at the last one. Yes, I'm happy with the officer's recommendation and the change of the policy, which is down the bottom, number 5.
Yep.
That is fine.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Farrelly, is there anyone opposed? If not, I will put that motion. We've got Councillor Lagan. Sorry? Oh, it's too late. We're just finishing the vote. You're welcome to ask a question of governance after. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 14.1 has been dealt with, so we'll go to item 14.2, notice of motion. Councillor Felicity Farrelly, crosswalks on West Coast Drive, page 358. Councillor Farrelly.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to propose that the motion that is on page 3...
the suggested alt-rec?
Yeah, the alternative recommendation.
362?
362.
Yep.
That the city writes to Main Roads to request the provision of formalised pedestrian crossings at suitable locations along West Coast Drive and Waterman's Bay, North Beach and Trigg.
Happy with that. Councillor Proud has seconded. Is there anyone opposed? A question? Is it just a quick question?
Just a quick question. I thought in the C's report going back to 2005-6 that they'd already established and agreed upon pedestrian crossings.
No.
Okay, fine.
That's why we haven't got them. It's been discussed, but nothing has happened. Is anyone opposed? If not, I'll put that. That is that? Who's that? Councillor Sandry. That is unanimous. Thanks, councillors. Item 15, notice of motions for consideration at the next meeting. Councillors, are there any notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting? No indication? No, just joking. Councillor Farrelly.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I've got a couple of notices of motion. They should be up, are they? Look, I'll try and work this.
Yeah, if you just read the in bold.
Yes, I can actually now.
Yep.
Yeah. That the city investigates the safety of the walking cycling path between Scarborough Beach and Trigger along West Coast Highway and review alternative options for the separation of slow cycling, walking and speed cycling, including the option of an environmentally friendly coastal boardwalk.
Thank you. And you're next.
I'd like to just make, possibly put in, if I can, just put in, what do you call it?
It's your motion.
Brackets,
Yep.
yes. Coastal boardwalk alongside the current path to the west.
Sure. Yep.
Adjacent, whatever it is.
Yep.
Therefore, it won't be additional thing across the middle of the dunes or anything. It will just be alongside.
Yep.
And the reason, of course, is if anyone's
You don't need a, that's fine. It's there.
online,
So,
you've seen it all.
did you have another motion?
Yes, of course, yes. The notice of motion number 2 is that the city investigates ways to remediate the congestion in streets in the redevelopment area in Scarborough, and that this include on-street indent parking as a pilot project in secondary streets whilst retaining trees and verges. Look, I have to say there is a what do you call it, a distance, impartiality?
No, that's fine for this one. You're just putting a motion up.
Okay. The reason for the motion, as everyone knows, listening to me, why that's about.
These will come back as a report,
Yeah,
so you get that.
Thank you.
Is there, Councillor Ree, you had a notice of motion?
Please. As part of the City of Stirling's commitment to the history and the respect and values of the intellectual property, I don't know what happened to it, somewhere up there.
Can we get Councillor Ree's motion up, please? Have we got it?
Respect. Yep. And value of our seniors, the 2021-2022 budget considers a minimum funding of $21,000 to allow for organisations such as the Listening Post to record a story from a retirement centre, autumn club, senior club, etc. in each of the City of Stirling wards to verbally capture the history of their local area. As population age within the City of Stirling increases, the opportunity to capture the stories of yesteryear, such as the fun of dancing and romancing at the Snake Pit in Scarborough, the last tram ride in 1958 along Beaufort Street, and within the city, it would be good and in alignment with the City of Stirling's heritage values to record stories from each of the areas in the city. Categorising via wards would make it easier to collate the different memories of the variety of localities within the ward.
Okay, thanks. Any others? Councillor Migdale.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. My notice of motion for consideration at the next meeting is that the Mayor writes to the Chairman of the Mallee High School Whopper Working Group to request representation by local government ward councillors in this group. Thank you.
Always writing, aren't I? Councillor Ferrante.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Once it comes up, you'll be writing on this one as well. The Mayor writes to the Minister for Electoral Affairs, the Honourable Stephen Dawson, to amend the Electoral Act prior to the next state election or by-election that prevents no electoral advertising material to be placed on any infrastructure or vegetation 24 hours prior to election day. This includes advertising billboards, posters and all promotional materials within 200 metres of any polling location, with the exception of how to vote cards and one poster of the candidate. Number 2, that the Council supports recommendation 1 being applied to all City of Stirling managed building, which is currently used as a polling location by the West Australian Electoral Commission effective 1st of January 2022. Item 3, that the Council amends its current signage and election policy reflecting recommendation 1. So moved.
Thanks. These ministers are all going to be avoiding me if I keep writing. Is there any other notice of motions? All right, brings us to item 16, which is a question by members of which due notice has been given. There is one at 16.1. It's a question on notice from Councillor Elizabeth Ree. Not normally. Is there something that's not clear?
Yes, please. On it, it actually says that as part of the Stevenson Avenue, the existing Nookamarras will only be realigned to connect to 2 culverts, blah, 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 blah. That wasn't the original plan. I mean, the Stirling City Centre project...
So Councillor Ree, these are questions on notice. So if you have a significant issue with that, then you'll have to take it up and raise it with the Director. And if you have an issue, put a motion forward. So it's discussed as a notice of motion.
Yeah, we...
But I don't think you can debate a question.
No, but we can ask for clarification.
That's not what you're doing, though. You would...
Well, I'm asking for clarification. In the original plan, it was for the whole length, not just a little bit.
Ms Littleton?
Thank you, Worship. Look, Councillor Ree is correct. The broad treatment of the Nookanborough is certainly part of the Stirling City Centre project. The project that we're currently delivering, though, is the Stevenson Avenue component, and the Stevenson Avenue component doesn't deliver an amendment to the Nookanborough stream as it currently sits. So there are two culverts that cross the Nookanborough to service or to support Howe Street and Oswald Street. Their construction, the location of the culverts have been designed to complement the Stirling City Centre project once we're in a position to deal with the land assembly. The Nookanborough stream will be dealt with through that project. We certainly are looking to vision the Nookanborough in accordance with the broad structure plan, but that's not part of the Stevenson project.
Councillor?
Mr Mayor?
Yep.
I did put up a motion a while ago with regard to making sure the stream stayed, so it could, I was a bit, I don't know why it wasn't referenced in here. So do I bring back that notice or?
Maybe if you take it offline with the director and have a chat. And
I did talk to Mr Roddick about it because as a planning point of view, Roddick.
Yeah, I think it's been answered, but I think if you take it offline, then if you feel the need to bring another motion up regarding it, you can do so. 17, new business of an urgent nature. I have nil. Brings us to item 18, matters behind closed doors. To have a mover to go behind closed doors, move Councillor Sargent, second Councillor Ferrante. Just go to the vote and go behind. Councillor, great. That is, who are we, Councillor Boothman, just your vote. That is...
Move the recommendation...
No, we're going behind closed doors.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Didn't realise.
Just nod.
Move on there.
Just put your hand up, nod. Yep. That is unanimous, noting that Councillor Migdale is not in the chamber. So we now go behind closed doors. And that brings us to item 12.19.1, which requires an absolute Item 19, which is closure of the meeting. I now declare the meeting closed at 8:28 p.m. Thank you to the members of the gallery who attended tonight, and good night to the viewers at home.